Yeah.
I'm home, it's my time, give me room, let me shine. I'm so high off alive, all my dreams came alive. My reflection is me, and I like what I see. Give me room, let me shine, let me shine.
Welcome to Radiant Voices, where creators and visionaries are sharing their stories. I'm your host, Amber Turner, and thank you so much for taking a moment out of your day to be here with me today. We all live busy lives, so I am grateful you are spending it with me right now. This episode of Radiant Voices is brought to you by Polished at Home, your on-site beauty provider. Whether you're a business wanting to provide in-office beauty and grooming services or a busy mom, they got you covered. Easy, convenient beauty, right on demand. Download the app, now available in the Google Play Store. And Making a Difference dinner is right around the corner. Have you gotten your tickets yet? Man, I hope so. Join us for Making a Difference dinner, hosted by Emmy Award-winning reporter and KOAA's Elizabeth Watts in Colorado Springs on January 13th, 2018. So I'm so excited for this night, and you definitely won't want to miss it. For more information on this event, visit makingadifferencedinner.com. So today on the show, I am so excited. We have Ginny Nadler, author of a remarkable new book, Spiritual Anatomy, Realigning Body and Soul. So welcome to the show, Ginny.
Oh, Amber, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to have you on the show because I find your book really fascinating. And I have always had an interest and curiosity in this subject matter of mind-body connection. So I'm really, really excited to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm excited too. It's a lifelong passion.
Absolutely. But before we get into the book, I find it imperative to learn about how you got to the place that led to the book. So can you share with the audience a little bit of background and some things that shaped you into the person you are today and led you to this book?
What a long journey it's been. I grew up in a, let's say, a very challenged family. I grew up in New York City. It was a family that struggled a great deal, and they really didn't have a whole lot of tools available to take care of themselves well, to take care of themselves physically, which was really ironic. While my parents were like that, my grandmother was a baby nurse.
Oh.
And in those years, I mean, she wasn't a registered nurse, but in those years when women had babies, they always had a nurse ready to go home with them when the baby was born, so that the mother could rest and the nurse would make all the meals and take care of the baby through the night and feed the baby. And my grandmother was a nutrition freak. And so my earliest recollection, this is really funny, my earliest recollection about nutrition is when I wanted a snack, and I would go to the refrigerator. I must have been between, I don't know, maybe 2 and 3 years old. I'd open the refrigerator door, and there were carrots, and there was a little bowl of wheat germ with a spoon in it. And I would just take the spoon, and I would eat a spoonful of wheat germ. And those were my snacks.
Now,
So,
what does that taste like? I'm not sure. I've never had it before.
It's dry, and it's wheat. It's like a flax meal.
Oh,
You know
that
how
doesn't
flax
sound
meal
appetizing.
is powdery? And yeah, so, but I loved it.
Really?
And I grew up with this grandmother who knew as much about nutrition as she can possibly know, and taught me. And my mother and my father, my mother was much better than my father, but I grew up in a home where there was an enormous amount of rage and anger.
Mm.
And so as a very young child, my ways of protecting myself and forming my barriers to care for myself became ones that ironically were to take as best care of myself as I could.
Mm.
And I only had the tools that I knew thanks to my grandmother. So I never was a child who got into a lot of sugar. There was something about my mission, actually, this lifetime, that told me what I was to be paying attention to, if I can say it that way.
Mm.
And so health became paramount to me. So I believe that was really my beginnings of being really interested in well-being.
Mm-hmm. And so I also read that you had your own physical and emotional pain that kind of led to your path in this mind-body connection. So can you tell us a little bit about that too?
Well, physical and emotional pain. Emotional pain, because I grew up in a pretty violent home, and was born into that story.
Mm-hmm.
So even before I was born, in utero, I now know, all these many years later and through my own physical challenges that I've had, I now know that the contractions that I created through fear in my body,
I see.
the holding on,
Mm-hmm.
the tensions, led to the energy in my body not flowing as well as it could have.
Sure. And I would say that that's like important for a lot of people to understand because they it seems that we are kind of conditioned as a society to get stressed over things like our physical ailments, but we don't realize that our mind has a lot to do with that. And so it's like for a lot of people, it can be a continuous cycle of being stressed over, oh, I'm in this pain or I have this pain or whatever. But it's that mentality that's feeding that.
Yeah, it's a mentality, and it's also learned responses.
Yes. That's
So,
interesting.
we grow up in families and are in systems of education, but mostly from our families, that we are repeating cycles. So in my own personal story, my mother was an intensely fearful person.
I see.
And I can recall, I was very little, I can recall that she would walk around the house in deep sighs. There were these, oh. And then finally I asked her, Mommy, why are you sighing all the time? And she said, anxiety. And then she said, you'll know what that's like.
Oh, wow.
And then the other thing that she taught me was, Ginny, we all have heart disease in this family. That seems to be what everyone dies of. You too will know what that's about.
Oh my gosh. That's almost
So,
self-fulfilling.
yes. So the banner, it's like a banner was passed on.
Mm-hmm.
And those responses are ingrained in the cellular structure.
Mm-hmm.
We literally, and there's a whole field now of science called epigenetics. And epigenetics, we now know that it's not just DNA that passes on information. It's our cultural stories, it's our environment that passes on information.
Speaking of that, I read that you had a lifelong fascination with the body structure, starting from when you were a little child, which you just described. And you really found yourself diligently in self-study of these sort of things. Can you talk a little bit about what you found and how has that research helped you on this path?
I think that I feel that I went to my body for wisdom. So the study for me of the human structure gave me something to hold on to. Through the pain and the stories in my family, it was very easy to disassociate.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as I had my physical structure, then I knew that I was here.
Mm-hmm.
And so very early on, as you asked, my fascination was what is this structure that I happen to be living in? And I think it was a question that not many people ask enough of.
Yeah.
Because we take for granted that this structure, this organism, is just going to operate in high level ways forever and ever and ever. But we all know that it doesn't. And it begins to break down for some of us very early. So I began my quest. Years into it, I started practicing yoga. And I had a very, very deep, intense practice, and moved out to California and studied courses in yoga. Became a teacher in the BKS Iyengar School of Yoga, and he was the first yogi in India to bring yoga to the West.
Wow.
And it was a school of yoga that was so deep into anatomy and physiology and muscles and bones and alignment and breathing. And I had to go to Stanford and I had to go into the cadaver labs and it just fascinated me. How does this human structure move as it does?
Mm-hmm.
And when it becomes challenged, why are we not able to move as well? What is it that actually prevents movement? So on an energetic level, what prevents movement? On a physical level, what prevents movement? These are the things that began to fascinate me. And in my own practice, I was an avid runner. I ran for years. I was in marathons, and I was doing a lot of yoga. I was going to India. I was very, very involved in yoga. I went to graduate school. I became a holistic nutritionist. So my whole practice with clients and organizations was on creating wellness initiatives. Mm-hmm. So in my own structure, I started to develop pain, sciatic pain, so severe, starting in my sacrum and ultimately the pain shooting all the way down the leg to the ankle and into the foot, that I had to start questioning, well, wait a minute here. I'm doing all this yoga. Been doing yoga for years. Yoga's fabulous. Mm-hmm. Well, what I discovered as I began to unravel muscle off bone so that I can get to the source of the congestion was that it wasn't so great for me to be practicing the intensity that I was with muscle fibers that were already literally screwed around ligaments and bone. Mm-hmm. So I was just exacerbating a situation that probably existed from the time I was a child.
Wow. So I want to switch gears a little bit because going into that, I know I want to talk about your business. And you're the founder and CEO of Core Body Wisdom. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, Core Body Wisdom was created to deliver the highest level of well care and creating programs for individuals and corporations. I did a lot of work in Silicon Valley corporations in the 80s and 90s. And so Core Body Wisdom is the umbrella organization for all of my well care initiatives. And I created in the mid 90s, I created with my organization and Yale University in New Haven, I created the first wellness center on the East Coast. So I got the opportunity to bring all of these initiatives that I had been piloting on the West Coast into a full-blown wellness center.
That's interesting because you work with individuals, businesses, and you travel and you do lectures and workshops. So I would like to know more about building your business because your mission is to serve others through your structural realignment integration. So many of our listeners, and myself included, are building businesses that serves others in some capacity. So how have you built a business and brand that impacts others in such a significant way?
I've built this business out of my pure passion for individuals to have the tools they need to be informed enough to take responsibility for their own care. So for me, building this business came purely from my love and from people wanting to be with me and learn from me.
That's amazing. So I have to know what led you to know that this was your mission and your purpose, because you hear a lot of people not really knowing their purpose, not knowing what their mission is, but they have passions, but they're not sure what their purpose is. So, and it's obvious that that's your purpose and your passion led you to that. So how did you know that that was your mission? Did you have an aha moment?
I think my aha moment came. I know my aha moment came when my mother, sighing, let me know that I was going to have heart disease.
Oh, that's interesting.
So in that moment, and I can see myself as a child standing there, looking up at my mom and thinking to myself, this is not my path.
How about what age were you when you realized that?
11, about 10 or 11.
Wow.
And as I said before that, my interest was in the body and health. But that was the moment that I said, if this is my legacy, which she seemed to be handing to me, and I didn't believe to be true, then I had to find out how to live my life and get as best educated as possible. And it was out of my own education and my own passion for healing. I started to teach. I became an elementary school teacher. However, in becoming a school teacher, I had 30 or 32 children in front of me who came with all kinds of messages of their own about what they couldn't be in life and wouldn't be and better not be. And so I believe that for me, the relationships that I built and the opportunities that I had to gift knowledge became my business. I mean, and it was ironic because, building core body wisdom did not happen overnight. I mean, one of the things along the road, because I was just a sincere foodie and eating well, and I had a child by then. So I wanted to make sure that she ate well. And so I became a caterer.
Okay.
And this was a stepping stone. So I was catering parties, and I was living in Washington, D.C., and I was catering Capitol Hill parties. And I was in a whole different world. But each step I took, I recognized was leading to something that was coalescing. It was like an energy that was happening, that was informing me, oh, this is what I'm interested in. And then I went back to school. I did graduate work in holistic health with nutrition as a focus. And then I worked with anorexic and bulimic young dancers in a school system.
I love that.
And then it was apparent that, it's not about the food, it's about control and power and self-esteem. So the trauma aspects of our physical story started to come forward for me. And then I started to work with other organizations who were doing similar work. And so, in terms of how did I build this business? It wasn't something that I woke up one morning and I said, oh, I'm going to create this today.
Yeah.
I feel very sure that it created me.
Oh my goodness. I love that.
And I had to be willing. And this is really for people who are in this place of, I don't know what I'm interested in. I don't know how to go about this. We have to be very, very quiet to listen to the whispers. Because I really do believe that the whispers are there. They certainly were there guiding me step by step by step. And did I have the courage to keep jumping off the next cliff? Did I have the courage to leave school teaching and say, no, this is not where I want to spend my days?
Oh my gosh, Jenny, I love that. Because, I think for a lot of people, they feel, especially if they want to follow their purpose or their passion, that they have to do it overnight and that it will be overnight. And so just like you kind of shared in the most beautiful way, it's an unfolding, it's a journey. And that's what makes it so beautiful. And I just love how you describe that. And to listen to the whispers, I mean, it's so important to really trust your gut, to trust your intuition, and actually sometimes it's like surrender. Let it happen. Let it just happen naturally. I love that, Jenny. So
Yeah. And there were moments, everyone, that I was kicking and screaming too.
I bet.
Like, gee, can we get on with this?
Oh yeah.
What am I doing here now?
So I really want to get into this book because, like I said before, I find it quite fascinating to know that your physical alignment can have a major impact on your alignment with God or the divine or whatever you call it, according to your book. So I would love to know more about that. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. When we come in to the structure, the human body, so mommy and daddy cells come together. We have one cell mommy, one cell daddy. And these cells start to multiply. The energy, the light that comes from, call it source, universal energy, whatever we want to call it, when we manifest in human form, embryologically, it's very fascinating what happens. The heart is the first organ in the embryo that forms. The first structure is in the pelvic floor, and that's called the perineum. And the perineum is a structure that ultimately, as we develop embryologically, is in between the anus and genitals. It's the spot in a woman when she has an episiotomy, when the baby is crowning, and they need to make an incision most times because, the canal has to be open it up for that baby's head. That is the space in men and women, in between anus and genitals. And what's so amazing is in the formation, when the light comes in, because we are pure light. That's what we are. When the light comes to form this human structure, the light lands exactly where the perineum forms.
That's interesting.
And everything emerges out of this space. 28 days in utero, the limb buds pop out. 28 days. The head comes from the perineum. Everything emerges from this space. And so where I live in the wisdom and the knowing of this embryologically, and this is pure science. This is where science and spirituality are now such a wonderful merging, because science now is meeting up with spirit. It's not that spirit is meeting up with science.
I agree.
Yeah. So when I realized that this is the source of our beginning. I mean, the tagline of my book is Realigning Body and Soul. I wanted to call it The Embryology of Consciousness, but my editors wouldn't allow me to do that because they said, someone with back pain, Ginny, is not picking up this book. So I said, okay, I'll save that for the next paper. But it is the embryology of consciousness. This is the source of our beginning. So when I started to work with my own body in then exquisite sciatic pain, and I use the word exquisite because that's how fine tuned, that pain was. And I was doing all of these practices and my yoga practice and going to chiropractors and doing so much massage and energy healers. And I finally said, where is the raveling coming from? Because the pain had to be coming from fibers that were literally screwing up internally, pulling my bones out of alignment.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that much. I could feel it. And so when I began to study the pelvic floor in depth and realized embryologically that this is the place, and this, what becomes a 1-inch little circular place in the pelvic floor, has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of fibers, and it looks like a rubber band ball in there. The fibers are crisscrossed every which way. So I began to feel in my meditations, in my visualizations, that what happened to me in utero, because of the tremendous amount of fear that I was birthed into, that I contracted and tucked my tail way under in total fear. You know, you see an animal, you see a dog, and when a dog is so frightened, the tail gets sucked under and the whole body kind of crouches into itself.
That's amazing.
Well, that's what happens to us if you look at a child who's terrified. Literally, shoulders go up to the ears, the head drops into the torso, the whole face gets distorted, the buttock muscles get tucked under.
Now, I want to ask a question based off that, because one of my questions was how do we know that we're not in alignment or out of alignment? Would it be those attributes that you just described?
Most definitely. Most definitely.
So I'm curious too, because if we are out of alignment, what is a prevalent issue or pain that you see in people that are out of alignment? I would suspect it would be back problems, because it seems like everyone has back problems, correct?
Yes. Yes. That's the first place usually that the light bulbs go off. It's the lumbar spine.
Oh,
And the
okay.
lumbar is right above the waist area. So below the waist, you have the sacrum, which is the lowest part of the vertebral column. Then you have the lumbar, which then those vertebrae are very, very big. So when we collapse and we tuck the tail under and we droop into one side, there is a shortening of those muscles on the side of the vertebra, and a collapse and a squeezing. And the energy just can't flow through there. So most often, people will say, oh, I have a slip disc. I'm about to have a slip disc. I have hip problems. That's really where most people notice it first. But of course, then it goes up into the upper back and it goes into the neck. It's all, we are one long story.
That's amazing. I checked out some of your videos on YouTube. I actually saw where you were actually helping a lady get into realignment. And it kind of reminded me of yoga, how you were talking her through it, how meditative it is, yoga can be. And so that kind of reminded me of yoga. And so I can really see how, especially like me during the day, I'm always trying to readjust my alignment, because I can just feel that I'm not, like there's something off there. So I think that I think it's pretty cool too, with the YouTube videos, and for our audience, if you are interested in it, definitely check out what is your YouTube channel? Is it your name?
It is my name, Ginny
Nadler.
Nadler.
Yeah, definitely check out her YouTube videos, because they're very, very interesting. But before we get into some wrap-up questions, I wanted to know, what was your biggest victory from your business?
I believe the biggest The biggest gift was others wanting to learn my modality. So I created a teacher training program because my passion is for this wellness protocol to get everywhere, to get into the medical industry, to get everywhere, physical therapy. And so I would say the biggest gift was when others said, Ginny, we want you to teach us.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Now I have a few wrap-up questions. But before we get into the wrap-up questions, where can people connect with you and find your amazing book?
Thank you. My website is corebodiwisdom.com. And people can go into the site and actually download a free excerpt of the book. It's the whole first chapter. So you can actually read some of the book. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. We'll include that information in the show notes for the show. Last week on the show, we had Hannah Hamlin, life and business coach, and she shared her opinion on what a radiant voice meant to her. So in your opinion, what makes a radiant voice?
A voice that comes purely from authenticity.
I agree.
A voice that comes from speaking deep, deep, deep truth.
I so agree with that. And so I'm a big advocate for learning the lesson from our struggles. I would love to know, what was a big obstacle you endured in your life? And in hindsight, what did you learn from it?
I myself was and often am my greatest obstacle in terms of the beliefs and the thoughts that seem to have allowed me and not allowed me to become the truth of who I am. So there was a lot of undoing in my thought patterns, in my belief systems, in what I inherited. And I would say that was my greatest obstacle. Like, gee, I couldn't possibly do that. I couldn't possibly be a woman who could make it on her own. I couldn't possibly divorce my husband and have my own life be as full and magical as it possibly could be. So all of the messages that were traveling along with me daily, hourly, moment by moment, were my greatest obstacles.
Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people, myself included, have a hard time overcoming that narrative in our heads that we, it's that is the most difficult. I mean, for me personally, it took me maybe, like, I started recognizing it a few months ago, and I actually stopped watching TV and listening to the radio. And when I shut all of that stuff off, I started hearing my narrative and the thoughts that were going through my head. And I didn't like it. I didn't even realize that I was thinking the things that I was thinking, because there's so much noise in our society today, whether it's social media, TV. We are just kind of like going through life and we don't even realize what we're thinking. And when you stop and you actually shut all that stuff off and then you listen, I was very surprised because I always thought of myself as a positive person. But then when I really started going deeper, the things that were going through my head weren't positive. And yeah, and I think that's like that for almost, I would almost suspect everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree that we are, we're educated in ways to believe things that just believe them.
Mm-hmm.
Where is our critical thinking?
Yes.
Critical thinking in education is no longer for most people.
You have to think commonly. Common. I like let the children come to their own conclusion as long as they get to the right answer, right? What difference does it make?
Yeah,
That's how I thought, anyways.
Right. Yeah. And what is a right answer?
Right.
I couldn't even answer you that question. I have no idea what right is.
True.
I know deeply that my body resonates with what feels like truth. Mm-hmm. But that for me might not be the same thing for another.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, using your radiant voice, what has been your life's deepest insight? And I think you just kind of mentioned this. And what would you say to listeners to help them become more centered?
I have been practicing a method called transparent communication, which is a wonderful kind of meditation where when I am in those moments of reactivity, whether I'm being reactive with my own thoughts, like getting into chaotic moments of, oh no, this isn't working, or when I'm in an argument with someone, and it doesn't even have to seem like an argument, but all of a sudden I find myself contracting in my body and getting angry or scared, that I slow myself down and I take a few breaths and I literally ask myself, how is my body feeling right now? Where in my body am I feeling? And it could be in my gut, in my solar plexus. It could be in my neck. And then I ask, how am I feeling emotionally? What are the emotions that are coming up for me right now? Oh, I'm so pissed. I'm enraged. I can't believe this person is saying this. So since this is my reaction, I want to really make note of what it is. And then I ask myself, well, what is my mind telling me? So when I can transparently communicate with what's going on within me, then I have better handle on listening to the other person that's in front of me. Because I want to listen transparently to them and what arises in me when someone else speaks. Beautiful. And not react.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Ginny, for joining me on today's episode. It definitely was a pleasure. And I'm so grateful for your insights for today's episode. It was amazing.
Thank you so much, Amber. I so appreciate what you are bringing to people and your passion. And it was an honor being here with you.
Oh, thank you. So next time on the show, we will have Marissa, the founder, editor-in-chief of award-winning blog Lupus Chick. Lupus Chick is committed to raising awareness on lupus and providing tangible solutions for patients and their families. I'm really excited to gain insight from her and to hear her radiant voice. Again, many thanks and blessings to you all. Until next time, let your light shine.
Yeah. Come home, it's my time, give me room, let me shine. I'm so high off alive, life, all my dreams came alive. My reflection is me, and I like what I see. Give me room.